Without legs and abandoned in the snow, the man no one expected saved her. The cold that night was sharper than anything Sarah had ever felt. It was the kind of cold that seemed to sneak into your bones, no matter how many layers of clothing you wore. She had been walking for hours, trying to get home before the snowstorm got worse. Her small town was usually quiet in winter, but tonight it felt almost empty, as if the world had disappeared beneath the thick blanket of white snow. The wind howled through the trees, shaking their branches and sending tiny clouds of snow swirling around her. Each step Sarah took felt heavier than the last, her boots sinking into the soft, icy powder. She tried to stay focused on the path ahead, but the storm made it almost impossible to see. Streetlights were barely visible through the thick flakes falling from the sky, casting long shadows on the snow. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and hugged her scarf close, hoping it would keep her warm. Her hands were already numb, her fingers stiff and difficult to move. Every now and then she would stop, shivering uncontrollably, and rub her arms to try and restore some warmth. Sarah's mind wandered to her family at home. She imagined her mother sitting by the fireplace, waiting for her to return safely. Her younger brother probably was already in bed, dreaming peacefully while she struggled alone in the storm. The thought made her push herself harder, even though her legs were tired and aching. She told herself she could make it. She had to make it. But deep down, a small seed of fear had begun to grow inside her. The path she was walking on wasn't well maintained. Snow had covered the edges, hiding ice patches that were deadly if stepped on the wrong way. Sarah had learned to be careful, but in the darkness and the blinding snow, it was nearly impossible to judge where the ground was safe. Then, without warning, her foot slipped on a hidden patch of ice. She tried to catch herself, but the slippery surface had won. She fell hard, the cold snow cutting through her coat and pressing against her skin. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and intense, and she realized immediately that something was wrong. Sarah tried to stand, but her leg refused to support her weight. Panic started to rise in her chest as she looked around. The storm was relentless and there was no one in sight. She called out, her voice trembling, "Help, anyone please." Her words were swallowed almost immediately by the howling wind. She tried again, louder this time, but there was no answer. The snow continued to fall, piling around her like a white wall, isolating her from the world she knew. The cold was creeping deeper now, making her shiver uncontrollably. Sarah hugged herself tightly, trying to conserve warmth, but the situation was dire. She realized she couldn't move, and she didn't know how long she could last if no one came to help. The fear she had tried to suppress finally erupted. Her breathing became uneven, her chest tightening as anxiety took hold. Thoughts raced through her mind. What if no one finds me? What if I'm here all night? Hours felt like minutes, and minutes felt like hours as Sarah struggled to stay awake. She tried to focus on anything that could keep her mind off the cold. She thought about her favorite memories, her childhood dog running in the yard, her mother's laughter, the smell of fresh bread on Sunday mornings. But even these comforting thoughts were no match for the biting cold and the growing fear in her heart. The snowstorm grew stronger, and the wind seemed to slice through her coat as if it had a mind of its own. Her ears were numb, and her vision blurred as the snow whipped against her face. Sarah's lips turned pale, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She knew she couldn't stay lying on the ground. The cold would eventually take over completely if she didn't find a way to survive. But with her leg injured and her strength fading, moving seemed impossible. In a small surge of determination, she tried again to shift herself onto her side, hoping to crawl to some shelter or even a road where someone might pass. Her hands dug into the snow, but every movement caused pain to shoot through her leg. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from the cold but from the overwhelming helplessness she felt. The world around her was a blur of white, and the storm's fury made her feel utterly invisible. Time seemed to lose meaning. The night dragged on and Sarah's body was exhausted. Every nerve in her body screamed to rest, but she knew she couldn't give up. She forced herself to keep moving, even in small, slow motions, inch by inch. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to survive. Someone will come." Her voice was weak, barely audible over the storm, but it was all she had to cling to. At one point she saw a faint light in the distance. For a moment hope surged through her. She called out again, louder than ever, but the wind swallowed her cries. She felt a wave of despair crash over her. Maybe no one is coming, she thought. Maybe I'll be alone here forever. Sarah's body began to fail her, her strength slipping away with every passing second. Her mind started to drift, caught between consciousness and sleep. She fought desperately to stay awake, clinging to the smallest fragments of hope. And in that moment, just when it seemed that the storm and the cold had claimed everything, a shadow moved in the distance, a figure navigating the snow with surprising ease. Sarah could barely make it out, but something about the figure gave her a strange flicker of hope. She tried to call again, but her voice barely made it past her chattering teeth. The figure drew closer, moving steadily and with purpose. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sarah felt a sense that she might not be completely alone. The night was still dark, the storm still vicious, but now a small spark of hope flickered in her heart. And though she didn't know it yet, the person approaching her was someone no one would have expected, someone who had faced unimaginable challenges of his own and had learned what it truly meant to be brave. The storm had not eased. The wind continued to roar and snowflakes flew wildly, stinging anything exposed to the cold. Through the chaos, Daniel moved with surprising calm. Despite having no legs, he had learned to navigate his town and the nearby wilderness with skill that many would find impossible to imagine. His wheelchair wasn't ordinary. It was strong, sturdy, and designed for difficult terrain. Thick wheels, reinforced frames, and a sharp sense of balance allowed him to move through snow and uneven ground where most people could barely walk. That evening, Daniel had been on his way home from a community center where he volunteered. He enjoyed helping others, especially children and people who had difficulties in their lives. Today, however, he had decided to take a longer route home to enjoy the quiet of the snow-covered forest nearby. He liked the way the world looked in winter, the silence, the soft crunch of snow under wheels, and the feeling that everything slowed down. As he moved carefully along the path, his eyes scanned the surroundings, alert for any signs of danger or need. Daniel was used to being underestimated. Many people assumed that because he had no legs, he couldn't be independent or brave. But over the years, he had learned to prove them wrong through actions rather than words. Tonight, he wasn't thinking about proving anyone right. He was simply moving through the storm, enjoying the calm in his own way. Then he heard it, a faint, broken sound carried on the wind. It was almost impossible to catch, but Daniel's ears had grown keen over time. He paused, straining to listen. There it was again, a soft, desperate voice calling for help. "Help, please," it whispered, almost swallowed by the snowstorm. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He knew immediately that someone was in trouble. Most people would have turned back, fearing the storm, the cold, and the unknown dangers hidden beneath the snow. But Daniel didn't hesitate. He had faced hardships every day of his life, and he had learned that fear should never stop him from helping someone in need. With steady hands and determination in his eyes, he pushed his wheelchair toward the direction of the voice. The snow made progress slow, but Daniel moved carefully, skillfully maneuvering the chair over uneven ground, icy patches, and small drifts of snow. His upper body was strong from years of practice and necessity, and his arms propelled him forward with unwavering focus. He refused to let the cold or the storm intimidate him. Each push of his wheels brought him closer to the source of the voice. As he got nearer, Daniel could see movement through the snow, A small figure was lying on the ground, barely able to lift herself. She was shivering violently, her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck and her coat dusted with snow. Daniel's heart went out to her. She looked so small and fragile against the vast, stormy landscape. He could see the fear in her eyes, the helplessness that came with being alone in such dangerous conditions. Daniel called out gently, "Hello, are you okay?" "I'm here to help." His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the howl of the wind. The young woman, Sarah, looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and disbelief. For a moment, she seemed unable to comprehend that someone had come. The storm had made her feel completely invisible, and now, seeing this man approach, she wasn't sure if it was real. He stopped at a safe distance, assessing the situation. Sarah's leg appeared injured, and the snow around her had begun to melt slightly from the warmth of her body, making the ground slippery. Daniel knew he had to act carefully. He couldn't rush, but he also couldn't waste any time. The cold was dangerous, and every minute mattered. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'm going to get you out of here. I'll take care of you, just stay still and hold on." His voice was soothing, full of reassurance. Sarah, exhausted and nearly frozen, nodded weakly. She could barely speak, but she managed a small, trembling, "Thank you." Daniel positioned his wheelchair close to her, but not so close that he would accidentally hurt her injured leg. He carefully scanned the area, making sure there were no obstacles, and then reached for a thick blanket he always carried for emergencies. He spread it over Sarah to help shield her from the cold wind. Even a small barrier made a huge difference in the harsh weather. Next, he looked for the best way to move her. Normally, it would be impossible for someone without legs to lift a person safely, but Daniel had developed techniques for helping others in difficult situations. Using a combination of leverage, careful positioning, and his strong arms, he prepared to help Sarah into a safer position. "Take a deep breath," he instructed softly. "We're going to get you out of this snow. I promise you'll be safe soon." Sarah tried to follow his instructions, but the cold had made her muscles stiff and uncooperative. She struggled to move even slightly, which made the task harder, but Daniel remained patient. Step by step, he shifted the blanket around her, making sure she was as comfortable as possible. Then, with careful coordination, he guided her into a sitting position, supporting her upper body with his strong arms while ensuring her injured leg didn't twist or bear weight. Sarah's teeth chattered uncontrollably, but she held on, trusting this man she had never met. For Daniel, helping her was instinctive. He didn't think about how others might perceive him or doubt his abilities. His entire focus was on the young woman in front of him, ensuring she stayed warm, safe, and calm. He knew the storm wasn't going to let up anytime soon, and that every second counted. Once Sarah was stable in a semi-sitting position, Daniel wrapped the blanket tightly around her and prepared to move her to his wheelchair. He positioned the chair carefully, making sure the wheels were steady and locked so there would be no sudden slips. Then, with controlled effort, he lifted her partially onto his lap and adjusted her so that she was secure. Sarah's fear slowly began to ease as she felt the warmth and reassurance of Daniel's presence. She realized that despite his disability, he was incredibly capable. She had expected help to come from someone stronger, faster, or more physically able. But Daniel's skill and determination proved that courage wasn't about having legs or being physically perfect. It was about heart and willpower. Daniel began to maneuver through the snow, moving slowly but steadily toward a safer area. Each push of the wheels required immense concentration and strength, but he didn't stop. He talked to Sarah throughout the journey, not only to reassure her but also to keep her awake and alert. "You're doing great," he said. "Just a little more and we'll get to somewhere warm. You're not alone anymore." Sarah nodded weakly, clinging to the blanket and to his words. She felt a flicker of hope she hadn't experienced since the storm began. The snowstorm continued to rage, but Daniel's focus never wavered. He navigated through drifts, avoided obstacles, and carefully managed every movement, all while keeping Sarah safe. Slowly, the faint outline of trees gave way to a small clearing where Daniel knew he could rest for a moment and reassess. Once there, he gently lowered Sarah onto a sturdier surface, making sure she was comfortable and shielded from the wind. She was exhausted, her body trembling, but she was alive. For the first time since being stranded, she felt a sense of safety. She looked at Daniel, her eyes full of gratitude and awe. You saved me," she whispered, her voice shaking from exhaustion and emotion. Daniel smiled gently, brushing snow from his jacket. "No," he said softly. "We saved each other. You held on and I did my part. That's all anyone can do." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that heroism often comes from the most unexpected people. She had been ready to give up hope, believing she was invisible to the world. But here was a man with no legs, someone society often underestimated, showing her that courage and determination can overcome almost anything. And in that quiet moment, amidst the cold and the storm, Sarah began to understand something profound. That true strength isn't measured by what the world can see, but by what someone can do when it truly matters. Daniel had proved that tonight. The storm was relentless, and the world around them seemed like a blur of white. Snow fell thickly, covering everything in sight, and the wind howled through the trees like an invisible beast. Sarah's body was still trembling from the cold, and each breath she took made her chest ache. She had been lying on the icy ground for hours, alone and afraid, and now, finally, someone had come to help. But even in this moment of relief, the fear of what could happen still lingered in her mind. Daniel looked at her with calm determination. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Moving someone injured through deep snow during a storm was no small task, and his own disability added another layer of difficulty. Yet, he refused to be discouraged. Over the years, he had learned to adapt to challenges that most people could never imagine. Life had taught him that fear could be faced and overcome with patience, skill, and courage. "Okay," Daniel said gently, his voice firm yet soothing. "We need to move slowly and carefully. The snow is deep and I don't want you to get hurt more. We'll do this step by step." "Can you hold on?" Sarah nodded weakly. Her lips were pale and her eyes were wide with fear, but there was a small spark of hope in them now. She clung to the blanket wrapped around her and to Daniel's words, trusting that he knew what he was doing. Daniel positioned his wheelchair carefully, checking the wheels and ensuring the frame was stable. He knew that even the smallest mistake could make the journey harder or even dangerous. The snow made the path uneven, with hidden dips and icy patches, and every movement required attention and precision. He adjusted the position of Sarah in the blanket, making sure her injured leg was supported and that she could rest against his chest safely. "Take a deep breath," he instructed. "We're going to start moving. I'll go slowly, I promise." Sarah obeyed, her teeth chattering as she inhaled and exhaled, trying to calm her nerves. The first few pushes of the wheelchair were difficult. The wheels sank into the snow, and Daniel had to lean forward, using his upper body strength to push and steer. His arms burned, but he didn't let the pain show. All that mattered was getting Sarah to safety. As they moved, the storm seemed to fight against them. Snow blew into Sarah's face, stinging her skin and making her eyes water. She tried to shield herself with the blanket, but it was no match for the relentless wind. Daniel adjusted her position, using his hands to protect her face from the worst of the storm. "Almost there," he said softly, trying to reassure her. "Just a little more. You're doing amazing." Sarah focused on his words, holding on tightly. She had never felt such a mix of fear and hope in her life. Every push forward was a battle against the snow, but also a victory, a step closer to warmth, safety, and life. She looked at Daniel and marveled at his strength and determination. Despite having no legs, he moved through the storm with skill and confidence that she could hardly comprehend. She realized that true courage didn't depend on physical ability. It came from the heart and mind. The journey was slow. Every few meters, Daniel would pause to adjust Sarah, make sure her leg was supported, and check the path ahead. He used small branches and rocks hidden beneath the snow to guide the wheels and avoid slipping. Each movement required patience, concentration, and precise timing. The storm showed no mercy, but Daniel was relentless. He refused to let it stop him from saving Sarah. "Keep talking to me," he said after a particularly difficult stretch. "Tell me your name, tell me where you're going, anything to keep your mind focused." Sarah hesitated at first, but then whispered, "I'm Sarah, I was going home. I didn't expect the storm to get this bad." Her voice shook, but speaking gave her a small sense of control. Daniel nodded. "Thank you, Sarah. That helps me too. We're a team now, and together we'll get through this." His words were simple, but they carried warmth and reassurance. Sarah felt a sense of companionship she hadn't felt in hours, and it strengthened her resolve to keep going. As they pushed forward, Daniel noticed a small rise in the terrain ahead. The snow was deeper there, and the wind stronger, making the wheelchair harder to move. He slowed down, leaning forward and using every ounce of strength in his arms. Sarah could feel the effort he was putting in, and she tried to help by leaning her weight strategically, though her body was weak and tired. Hours seemed to pass like minutes as they continued. Sarah's thoughts drifted between fear, hope, and gratitude. She thought about her family, imagining her mother waiting for her at home, unaware of the danger she had faced. She thought about her younger brother, dreaming peacefully in bed while she struggled to survive in the storm. And she thought about Daniel, this man she had never met, who had risked everything to save a stranger. Finally, the trees began to thin, and Daniel recognized a familiar clearing nearby, a safer spot where the snow was less deep and the wind less violent. He guided the wheelchair carefully, making sure Sarah's leg remained supported and that she stayed warm under the blanket. The sight of the clearing brought a small spark of relief to both of them. They were not out of danger yet, but it meant the worst of the storm's fury was behind them. Daniel paused in the clearing and helped Sarah adjust in the blanket. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little further and we'll find shelter and warmth." Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of hope that she hadn't dared to feel before. She trusted Daniel completely now, knowing that he had the strength, skill, and determination to see them through. From the clearing, Daniel spotted an old shed nearby. It wasn't large, but it would provide protection from the wind and a place to rest. He carefully maneuvered the wheelchair over the last stretch of snow, using small branches to guide the wheels and keep them from sinking too deeply. Sarah could feel herself getting warmer as the wind lessened, and she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. Once they reached the shed, Daniel helped Sarah out of the wheelchair and onto a wooden bench inside. The space was cramped but dry, and it offered shelter from the storm. He spread the blanket over her again and checked her condition carefully. Her lips were still pale and her body was trembling, but she was safe for now. "See, you made it," he said softly. "You're safe here. Take a few moments to rest. We'll figure out what to do next." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from gratitude and relief. She had been ready to give up hope, to believe that no one would find her. And now, here she was, alive and safe because of the courage and determination of a man she had never expected to be her hero. They sat together in the shed, listening to the storm rage outside. Daniel shared stories of his life, of how he had learned to navigate the world without legs, of the challenges he had overcome. Sarah listened in awe, realizing that this man, whom the world might underestimate, had a strength that went far beyond the physical. She realized that heroism often comes from the most unexpected people, and that courage isn't about appearances, it's about actions. Hours passed as they waited for the storm to calm. Daniel kept Sarah warm, talking to her and making sure she stayed alert. He made her laugh gently with small stories and observations, helping her forget the fear and cold, even for a little while. Sarah felt a bond forming, a connection forged in adversity and trust. By the time the storm began to lessen, Sarah's body had warmed slightly, and her spirit had been lifted. She felt a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. She knew that she owed her life to Daniel, but more importantly, she realized that courage and kindness could come from the most unexpected places. That night in a small, snow-covered shed, a young woman and a man who had faced immense challenges found safety, warmth, and a profound connection. The journey had been difficult and the storm still raged outside, but inside the shelter there was hope, a hope that would carry them forward, beyond the snow, into safety and a story that neither would ever forget. The storm outside had finally begun to lessen, leaving the world coated in a quiet blanket of snow. The wind still whispered through the trees, but the violent gusts had softened into gentle drafts. Inside the small shed, the warmth of safety wrapped around Sarah like a comforting hug. She had never felt so cold in her life, and now, slowly, her body began to recover. Her fingers and toes were numb, but the blanket Daniel had wrapped around her, along with the steady presence of someone she could trust, helped her regain a small measure of warmth. Sarah's body ached from the hours she had spent lying on the cold ground. Every muscle seemed stiff, and even breathing felt like an effort. But as she looked at Daniel, sitting beside her and carefully checking the blanket, she felt a wave of gratitude so deep it almost overwhelmed her. She realized that without him, she might not have survived the storm. And more than that, she realized she had found a friend, someone whose courage and kindness went far beyond what she had expected. "You're doing better now," Daniel said softly. "Your hands and feet are warming up, and that's a good sign. The storm is calming, and will get you somewhere warmer soon." His voice was steady, patient, and reassuring, like an anchor in a world that had seemed chaotic and cruel just hours ago. Sarah nodded, too tired to speak, but her eyes conveyed everything she felt: fear, relief, gratitude, and awe. Daniel knew that staying in the shed was only a temporary solution. He wanted to make sure Sarah was completely safe and that her injuries were treated. He also wanted to keep her calm and alert, knowing that fear could take over if she became too exhausted or anxious. "I know it's been a long, scary night," he said, "but you're safe now. You're not alone. Let's take a few moments to rest before we move." Sarah leaned against the wall, her teeth chattering slightly, and pulled the blanket tighter around her. She watched Daniel as he carefully inspected her leg, making sure it hadn't been further injured during the rescue. He moved with care and confidence, his experience evident in the gentle way he adjusted her position and checked her comfort. It was remarkable to her that someone who had faced so many challenges in his own life could remain so calm and composed under pressure. "You've done so much for me," Sarah whispered, her voice weak but sincere. I don't know how to thank you," Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me, I'm glad I was here. And besides," he added with a small laugh, "sometimes the world underestimates me. Tonight, I got to show that I can do something important." Sarah smiled back, feeling a warmth in her heart that had nothing to do with the blanket. They talked quietly for a while, sharing stories to pass the time and take their minds off the storm outside. Daniel spoke about his life, about the challenges he had faced without legs, and about how he had learned to adapt and find strength in unexpected ways. Sarah listened intently, fascinated by his determination and courage. She realized that Daniel's disability had never stopped him from living fully or from helping others. In fact, it seemed to have given him a unique perspective on life, one that valued patience, empathy, and resilience. Sarah began to speak about herself as well. She told Daniel about her family, her hopes, and the small things that mattered most in her life. She spoke slowly at first, her voice hesitant, but as she felt safer and warmer, she grew more confident. The conversation flowed naturally, two strangers forming a bond through shared vulnerability and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. As the minutes passed, Sarah felt her body gradually relax. The shaking from the cold lessened, and the pain in her leg became more manageable. Daniel's careful attention had ensured that she remained as comfortable as possible, but beyond the physical care, it was the emotional support that mattered most. His presence reassured her, gave her hope, and reminded her that even in the darkest, coldest moments, kindness and courage could still shine through. At one point, Sarah laughed softly at a story Daniel told about his early days learning to navigate the world without legs. The sound surprised her. It was the first genuine laugh she had produced since the storm began. Daniel smiled, pleased to hear it. "See," he said. "Even in the middle of a storm, we can find reasons to smile." Sarah nodded, feeling lighter, as if the weight of fear and cold were slowly lifting from her shoulders. Daniel suggested small exercises to help her circulation and prevent stiffness from the long exposure to cold. They moved gently, careful not to strain her leg, and Daniel guided her through each step. Sarah followed his instructions, marveling at how capable he was and how reassuring his presence felt. She realized that heroism could take many forms, and in Daniel, she had witnessed a form of courage and skill that defied expectations. Hours passed, and the storm outside continued to fade. The snow had piled high, creating a quiet, soft world outside the shed, but inside, warmth and safety began to replace fear and pain. Sarah and Daniel shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Sarah began to understand that this experience had changed her. She had faced fear, endured hardship, and discovered the kindness of someone she never expected. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As the night wore on, Daniel prepared for the next step, getting Sarah to a proper shelter where she could rest and recover fully. He checked the path outside, planning the safest route through the snow. Sarah, now more alert and slightly stronger, trusted him completely. She knew that the journey ahead would still require effort, but with Daniel by her side, she felt capable of facing it. Before they left, Sarah looked at Daniel and said, "I've never met anyone like you. You saved me, not just my body, but my hope." Daniel shook his head gently. "I didn't save you alone. You held on. You trusted me, and together we made it. That's what matters." Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude and admiration. She realized that courage and kindness often come from the most unexpected people, and that true heroism isn't about what someone can do for attention, but what they do quietly, selflessly, when it matters most. Finally, they stepped outside the shed. The storm had calmed almost completely, leaving the world blanketed in soft snow and quiet. Daniel carefully guided the wheelchair along the path, and Sarah, wrapped in blankets, felt warmth return to her body and hope return to her heart. Each step, each push of the wheels, was a reminder of how far they had come together. They reached a nearby home, where Daniel knew she could receive proper care and warmth. Sarah's family, who had been worried and searching for her, were overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. They embraced her, thanking Daniel over and over for his courage and determination. Sarah looked at him, feeling a bond that went beyond words, a connection forged through adversity, trust, and the extraordinary kindness of someone who had faced challenges of his own and still put her safety above everything else. That night Sarah rested in a warm bed, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by love. Daniel stayed nearby for a while, making sure she was comfortable and safe, and then returned to his own home. Both of them knew that this night had changed them forever. Sarah had learned the meaning of resilience, courage, and unexpected friendship. Daniel had once again proven that even in the face of life's greatest challenges, one person's determination and heart could make a world of difference. And as Sarah drifted into sleep, she thought about the man who had saved her, the hero no one had expected. She realized that sometimes, the people who inspire us the most aren't the ones we notice first. They are the ones who quietly, patiently, and courageously act when it matters most. The morning after the storm, the town woke to a world transformed. Snow covered every surface, turning streets, trees, and rooftops into a sparkling white landscape. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of calm and quiet, almost as if nature itself was holding its breath. Sarah, now safe in her warm home, looked out the window at the world outside and reflected on the events of the previous night. It felt almost surreal. Only hours ago, she had been lying in the snow, injured and fearing for her life. Now she was wrapped in blankets, surrounded by her family and safe. Sarah's parents, still shaken by the ordeal, kept glancing at her in disbelief. Their relief was overwhelming, and their gratitude toward Daniel, the man who had saved their daughter, was endless. Sarah tried to tell them what had happened, but words seemed inadequate to describe the courage and kindness she had witnessed. He came out of nowhere, she said, her voice still soft but steady. He didn't even hesitate. He just helped me even in the storm. I don't know how to explain it. He's amazing. Her mother wiped away tears, holding Sarah tightly. We need to find him, she said. We need to thank him properly. That man, he saved your life. Sarah nodded, her own heart full of gratitude. She knew she wanted to see Daniel again, not just to thank him, but to let him know how much his actions had meant to her. His courage and compassion had left a mark on her that she would never forget. Meanwhile, Daniel was already moving through the snow-covered streets, quietly returning home. He didn't think about recognition or thanks. His actions had been instinctive, guided by the belief that no one should be left in danger. To him, helping someone in need was simply the right thing to do. But as he maneuvered his wheelchair along the quiet streets, he noticed neighbors emerging from their homes, talking in hushed voices about the previous night's events. Someone had seen him in the storm, helping a young woman, and the story had begun to spread. Word traveled fast in the small town. People were amazed that a man with no legs had rescued someone during such a dangerous snowstorm. Many had assumed he couldn't be capable of heroic deeds, but that assumption had been shattered in the most dramatic way possible. Daniel's courage became a topic of conversation, not only because of the storm or the rescue, but because it challenged people's expectations and beliefs about strength, ability, and heroism. Sarah's story, too, became part of the town's narrative. She spoke with her friends and family, describing the fear she had felt lying in the snow, the cold biting at her body, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness. But then she spoke of Daniel, the man who had appeared when hope seemed lost, who had guided her through the storm, and who had shown her that courage and kindness often come from the most unexpected people. Her words carried emotion, sincerity, and awe, inspiring those who listened. Over the next few days, the town came together to ensure that Daniel received recognition for his bravery. Local officials invited him to share his story at a community meeting, where he spoke humbly about the events of the night. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said softly. "I just did what I could. But seeing Sarah safe, seeing her alive, that's all the thanks I need." His words, spoken with humility and sincerity, moved everyone in the room. People applauded not only his bravery, but his character, the quiet strength that had guided him through challenges all his life. Sarah visited Daniel's home soon after. She wanted to thank him in person, to let him know how much she appreciated what he had done. When she arrived, she found him adjusting his wheelchair in the driveway, as usual, calm and composed. She approached him with a shy smile, holding a small gift, a token of her gratitude. "Daniel," she said softly, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life, and not just that, you gave me hope. You showed me what courage really looks like." Daniel smiled gently, brushing snow from his jacket. "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You held on, and that's what mattered. I just did my part." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from gratitude and admiration. She realized that Daniel's actions had taught her a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. Their bond grew stronger in the days that followed. Sarah often visited Daniel, and together they shared stories, laughter, and reflections on life. She learned more about his experiences growing up without legs, about the challenges he had faced, and about the determination and patience that had shaped him into the person he was. She came to understand that true heroism wasn't about physical strength or recognition, but about resilience, empathy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. Daniel, in turn, learned about Sarah's world, the life she had almost lost, her family, and the dreams she had for the future. He admired her courage, her ability to hold on even in the face of fear, and her gratitude for the smallest gestures. Their friendship became a source of inspiration for both of them, a reminder that human connection and compassion could thrive even in the harshest conditions. The story of the rescue eventually reached local newspapers and online platforms. People were inspired by the courage of a man who had faced life's challenges and still risked himself to save another. Many shared the story widely, commenting on how Daniel had shown that disability does not define a person's strength, and that heroism often comes from unexpected places. Sarah's words describing the fear, the snow, and the moment she first saw Daniel resonated with everyone who read them. The attention didn't change Daniel. He remained humble, continuing his daily routines, volunteering at the community center and helping others whenever possible. But he noticed a difference in how people treated him. Now, they looked at him with respect and admiration, not pity or doubt. And for Sarah, the experience changed her life as well. She had faced fear, endured hardship, and discovered the strength of human kindness and courage. She knew that this experience would shape the way she approached life, the way she helped others, and the way she viewed the people around her. In the months that followed, Sarah and Daniel often met to talk and share experiences. They visited schools together, sharing their story to inspire students and teach lessons about resilience, courage, and the power of helping others. Children listened in awe, fascinated by the story of the storm, the snow, and the unexpected hero who had saved a life. Adults were inspired as well, reminded that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when guided by compassion and determination. Sarah's family also remained deeply grateful. Her parents often invited Daniel for meals and gatherings, treating him like a member of the family. They shared laughter, stories, and moments of reflection, reinforcing the bond that had begun on that stormy night. Sarah's younger brother, who had once been asleep while the storm raged, grew to admire Daniel as a role model, someone who showed that strength isn't just physical, it's about heart, determination, and courage. Years later, the story of that night remained a part of the town's history. People still spoke of the storm, the snow, and the man who had appeared when hope seemed lost. Daniel's heroism became a symbol of resilience and compassion, inspiring generations to come. And Sarah, who had been saved that night, carried the lesson of courage and kindness in her heart, sharing it with everyone she met, ensuring that the memory of that extraordinary night lived on. In the end, the story was not just about a rescue in the snow. It was about humanity, the unexpected heroism that exists in ordinary people, the bonds that form through trust and compassion, and the lessons we learn when we face fear and emerge stronger. Sarah and Daniel's lives were forever changed, their connection a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest moments, warmth, courage, and hope can be found in the hearts of those who act with kindness and determination. And though the storm had passed long ago, the impact of that night continued to ripple through their lives, their town, and the countless people who heard their story. It was a story of survival, bravery, and the extraordinary power of the human spirit, a story that would inspire others for generations, proving that heroism often comes from the most unexpected people, and that even in the harshest conditions, hope and kindness can prevail.